take a look at Call to Adventure. Alright. First off, if you're looking for an explanation of how to play, I'll be giving one. But this isn't the video you want for that. Go find somebody else's. There are people who do a much better job of that, and I'm sure they'll be higher rated over on BGG. What brought me to this one? Well, to begin with, the immediate proximate cause was the rules that I'm reading for something else are too big to jump that thing, and I wanted to play something. So I set this up, played it solo once, come back and do it again. I'm not going to use the solo rules. We'll talk about those because they actually may be the most interesting part of the game. And maybe if I'm really, really excited, I'll try playing a co-op game of it instead. Because I think actually the co-op may be the most exciting variant to this game. So far I'm enjoying it. But this is an odd game for me to have picked up, maybe. Maybe not. And you'll see the why. This is perhaps I am almost certain the last game that I picked up with the idea of my wife playing it in mind. And it was not that long before her death. And there were a couple of factors that really, really intrigued me about it and told me, hey, maybe this will be something. She had pretty much stopped playing games with me, but maybe this will be something that, she would be willing to do and enjoy. Yeah. One part of that is that the concept behind the game is that you're creating a story of a character. Another thing that was really appealing was the tarot-ish nature, and you'll see this to some extent, at least of the size of some of these cards. But actually the whole story is basically of your life is told with these tarot-sized cards that are not really tarot-ish at all. I had hopes along that. She was very, very much into tarot, actually designed her own deck, which I managed to find, and I didn't know that she had a physical copy of it, actually. She actually did complete that, even though she destroyed almost everything that she made otherwise. Let's talk a little bit about the components and whatnot that you're facing. So the game holds up to 4 players, and you might be able to twist it and push it beyond that even. Each player has a player board. These aren't really absolutely necessary except to track this and to give you some information. You've got how light or dark your character's story has become, essentially. Which side they've turned towards. And as you move in either direction, you start scoring points in that direction. But eventually, you end up with a nasty, nasty penalty in light points if you go far enough dark. You have these little pieces which are your experience markers, and they can be expended for various usage. You have some information about what the different cards, or what the different tiles in the game allow you to do. One of the big things with this game is it doesn't use dice or cards to randomize. It uses these tiles. And this is kind of a, I don't know, you're chucking runes is what you're doing in the game. And you take a fistful of these that you have available for a particular thing and you throw them, and, whichever side they come up determines how well you do in anything. That may have been some of the impetus towards designing the game, and it does kind of fit in thematically with the, what's your character's fate, which is really what the story is, right? Okay. You have also the runes themselves, which are nicely made, actually. couple of sets of cards. These guys are going to represent your character's origin or beginnings. I'm trying to remember the terms that they use because they're kind of important. Motivations, what's going to drive them in their story, and finally their destiny. Now, the destiny is probably the most important of them because it determines what, well, that's hard to say. Your destiny is very important because that determines your victory point bonuses at the end of the game. You're going to score points for a bunch of things, but those points get heavily modified. And I would say it ranges about a third of your total points. Comes off of what your destiny card grants you. That's assuming you're doing well with it. The other two types of cards are going to give you bonuses in arriving there. And the way that you're going to set up the game, you can notice I don't have it set up yet. And that's because setup is part of the play. You shuffle these three decks. Each player gets 2 cards from each deck and chooses one of each of the cards to set up. They'll be putting the first 2 cards, their origin and motivation, face up, and their destiny is face down, which is really important because you can't let your enemies know, your opponents in the game know what you're scoring for, or else they might be able to do some bad things to you. Then you set up a tableau of these other cards, and level 1 is going to correspond to your origin. Level 2 is going to correspond to your motivation. Level 3 is going to correspond to your destiny card. This is really just kind of more a bookkeeping thing than anything else. But the storyline gets harder, or the tasks that you're going to face get harder as you go on. So if you were capable of going after a level 2 or level 3 before you've acquired much experience, you're going to be bad. You're going to have a less likely chance to succeed. Okay. And you'll notice all the level 1s get turned face up, and that is an indication of these are the choices that are available to do something with in each game turn. There's 2 other decks. Trying to remember what they're called. They're the hero cards and anti-hero cards. And these are going to provide you with benefits that you can play sometimes as interrupts, sometimes during your own turn to prepare for a challenge, whatever. Sometimes after you complete the challenge, as far as I can tell, in order to give you a bonus for it. Now, you're restricted. If you're in these 2 spaces, you're unrestricted. But if you're up here, you can only play hero cards, and if you're down here, you can only play anti-hero cards. And now what's kind of weird, I thought unutilized cards were worth points. Each of these cards has basically a value on it. And the value is always 1, so don't worry too much about that. But the actuality is that you need to store these aside as you play them, and they become part of your story. There's no real way to tag them to the particular event in your life that they relate to. So one of the final things in the game that has nothing to do with the scoring, but is kind of an enjoyable concept, is that you recite your character's story, and you don't really have a way to associate the hero cards that are assigned with them with that, which is a little disappointing, but reciting the story doesn't really, have anything to do with the gameplay itself. It's just sort of a fun aspect to end the game. Okay, on your turn, you're allowed to do one of a few things. So some of the cards that come up are traits. You can just grab a trait if you meet certain requirements. And some of those requirements are certain skills that you have associated with runes or whatever, and you'll see how those happen. Well, here's one of them, for example. And usually you're capable of discarding an experience point to obtain that trait. I'm not going to really speak to whether traits are particularly advantageous compared to successful quests or whatever, challenges. A second thing you could do with your turn, or instead, is you can attempt a challenge. Most of the rest of the cards, and in the basic game, all the rest of the cards, are challenges. They essentially... I feel like I'm going to have to show one, which means I have to reshuffle. These cards are not trivial to shuffle. You can't shuffle them sideways, really. They're flexible enough that lengthwise you can shuffle them, but then you need big hands. And actually, this is one of the things with my wife's tarot deck. It's not the only one that's designed this way, but it was designed in particular for people with small hands to be able to shuffle, because your standard tarot size cards are hard to shuffle. And you're supposed to shuffle them in different ways, though, so I don't know. I'm not really sure. Her hands were not that tiny, but then they also were not big. Okay, so let's take a look at... level 1? Really? Okay. Added card. So this is a trait. And here are your prerequisites to picking it up. And then you gain a couple of things. This is one of the symbols. In this case, it relates to Constitution. And that'll be a tile that's available for you to throw into your challenges from then on. This is, I don't know what they're called, but it's essentially a type of story, story icons, and you want to collect up sets of the same one. If you can get 2 or more of the same type in your story, you get a bonus to your points in the story. That's the only thing that they serve. Well, they affect some of these cards too. Okay, challenges though are the more interesting. So challenges will usually have 2 runes associated with them, and you are allowed to grab for each of the runes associated with them as many of the runes as equal to the symbols that you have, up to 3. The first 2 are these kind of normal ones, and this is a 1-point value success, this is a 2-point value success, and this system actually kind of reminds me of the vampire system, where you're looking for a certain number of successes, but instead of using 10-sided dice with target numbers, it's using these runes. This one, with the 3 dots on it, you cannot take unless you have 3 of that rune, however you get it. That one has special effects. This side with the symbol on it is the same as the normal of that symbol. It's worth 2 points. This side will have a special effect, which is not necessarily advantageous. So for example, in this case, it gives you 0 points towards the challenge. Well, you're putting it in here because you want to succeed in getting points towards the challenge, but it gives you a bonus experience point. They're kind of wild, you know? They can show up as additional, as more useful, actually, like getting that experience point or some other bonus that you might get off of these, drawing a hero card, stuff like that. Those can be really, really huge. But anyway, you grab the tiles that you have the icons for. You are then allowed to expend experience tokens, up to 3, to add dark tiles. Dark tiles are a little risky. If they come up on this side, they're worth a point. If they come up on this side, they're worth 2 points, but they move you down the path of darkness. Which may not be a bad thing, but you don't want to get all the way down. And it will limit the cards that you can play, just as going towards the light does. In addition to those, you freely get these three. Two of them have a blank on the other side and are worth a point, and one of them is worth a point or a hero or anti-hero card of your choice. Which one you want to draw from. You can kind of calculate out your odds. These cards can be very, very effective towards strengthening your position. And then you make a cast of your runes, and if you meet the target number, you collect this card and put it under your appropriate leveled story. This will be face up. And now it's given you an additional icon, and it may have other values to it. Now, some of them, many of them, have two different choices there, two different paths. You get to pick which path you take. In this case, though, this path increases the strength of the card by 1. So you'd have a target of 4 instead of 3. All right. You're allowed to do one of these actions. That's it. But you're also allowed to do these other things within your actions. So you could do a journey. If you don't like the cards available on the tableau, you can spend an experience to discard a card that's on the table and get a new card in place. You can use effects on your cards, and you can play your hero and anti-hero cards. Origins usually give you a way to do things. Usually that's gaining experience. Motivations give you generally a way to expend experience to gain some advantage under certain conditions. The hero and anti-hero cards can be triggered by these. Okay, so here's a card that when you do this, when you gain this trait, and this is indeed a trait, you get this, which is just scoring value, but you also get a hero card. Oh, yeah. So some of them can give you them. These cards that you have, generally you can play them at any time unless they specify something that prevents it. Like some of them say on your next challenge. That means you can't be in the midst of a challenge and bonus it within that. When the card, here, this is the important thing I forgot. When the card takes effect, you place it face up, and it's going to count towards your story. So you want to make sure you play these things, because they're each worth basically a victory point, and possibly more. All right, once you've gotten 3 of these traits or challenges associated with your current level, if you're the first person to do that, the next level opens up, and the cards are flipped up. You are never allowed to get more than 3 on any one of these levels. However, other players are allowed, who don't have the full 3 in, say, their first level, are allowed to go on and play for the second level cards if they think they can, succeed with them. All players may gain or face story cards from any revealed act, but you still must place 3 cards under your current character card before proceeding to fill the next character card. I don't even know what that means. There's actually a question about this, and you may not be able to get your 3rd card in a later act until you've filled in the earlier acts. You may not be able to fully complete any act until you've fully completed all previous. Eventually, someone will get their 3 story cards associated with their 3rd act. At this point, the game enters into kind of a sudden death. Each player gets 1 remaining turn. And then you score their cards. So everybody reveals their destiny card. They don't do that necessarily then. You add all triumph and tragedy points off of these cards. There aren't a lot showing. I'm pawing through looking for them. I know they're fairly common, but maybe not so much on the first level. Anyway. Triumph are these, tragedy are these. You add any points that you gained from the story icons. Remember, you get these, you want to collect, like the mountains, you want to collect sets of them. Well, if you have 2 of them, it's worth 2. If you have 3, it's worth 4. If you have 4 of that, it's worth 8. If you have more than 4, it's still worth 8. All right. Any experience token you have remaining is worth a point. Every hero card that you've, or anti-hero card that you've played, are worth either triumph or tragedy points. Again, you don't really differentiate between these. They're just victory points. But there are destinies, there are destiny cards that differentiate with them. And there's other cards that also are affected by that. Then you look at the corruption track and see if you get any points in either of the destiny types there. And then finally you look at your destiny card and you look over what it gives you in bonus points and add that in. I'm going to have to swap batteries. First play of the game, they suggest you just deal out 3 of these at random to each player. That seems like a really dumb idea. I see very little harm in giving new players the opportunity to choose how they want to configure their storyline. And there are connections between the cards that are obvious. You know, they're really obvious. And if you're just dealing them out, you're going to end up in a position where somebody has a really randomly good solution. The one place where this is a little iffy may be on the final Destiny card. You might be able to say some of the Destiny cards are just, you know, a priori more valuable than others or something like that. And that knowledge might help you pick the right one. But still, taking away that ability to make that decision seems like a dumb idea to me. If anything, you are probably reducing the chances of a player getting really hosed or a really unbalanced situation coming out if you allow people to have a choice. Okay. The not-so-basic game adds a couple of different types of cards. It adds allies, which are shuffled into the story decks, and when they're revealed, the active player chooses a challenge and tucks the ally under it. It doesn't say what to do if they're revealed on the first draw of a tableau. I think probably the best thing to do is to shuffle them back into their deck at that point and draw replacements for them. But normally what happens is when they're revealed, the active player puts it under a current challenge. And that challenge is going to be +1. But now the ally, if you win that challenge, ends up giving you an ability that usually you can spend experience for or just discard the ally to trigger. Allies can have other effects in the game. Okay. And they become associated with that challenge, which means if the challenge goes away for some reason, the ally goes away with it. There's also adversary cards, which are basically more powerful challenges that I don't think have paths, and they have a special ability, which largely just either... So far what I've seen is they either affect challenges against themselves or they affect the entirety of play while they're still face up and undefeated. Okay. Briefly, I'll speak to the variant rules for solo. Basically, there's going to be an adversary, which is not the same as these adversaries, is it? Yeah, it is. No. These are the adversary cards. This is something different. No, you take out the adversary cards. They match these. Yeah. You set aside the adversary cards, randomly select one as your adversary, and then you take a quest card, which is this, that matches it. The adversary is going to be getting some portion of the anti-hero cards as their own deck, which means maybe some of the most valuable anti-hero cards get pulled out of the player's set, and that's going to change the balance of them. And now, the way that you're going to win is you have to work on how many adversary points there are, and these get gained through actions here. And if the adversary gets too many points, they win the game. You have to otherwise I'm trying to remember this. You have to otherwise attempt the adversary challenge on the last turn. Once you've gotten 8 story cards, your last turn must face the adversary. And once you defeat the adversary, they're tucked under your destiny card. In a co-op game, if one player defeats the adversary, everybody else gets one final turn to fill out their tableau of their story, and you score it as usual. So, kind of like Mage Knight, you end up in a semi-co-op where one player wins the game, but only if you defeat the adversary. And how players are going to react to that, I don't know. You know, had my wife and I played this as semi-co-op, probably she would decide not to try to defeat the adversary if she thought I was in the lead. Which I never liked that viewpoint, but it's sort of looking at the game less like, to me it always made sense, okay, we're working towards this specific goal, and that's we win the game together if we get that goal, but I win it better if I did more towards it, you know, as opposed to like she kind of saw it as, well, geez, if I can't be the hero of the story, let's let the earth be doomed type of experience, which I definitely don't see. On the other hand, you know, I think taking different perspectives into play can be very interesting, especially with a game, especially with some of these semi-co-ops. Thinking particular here, Republic of Rome gets to that. Anyway, like I said, this wasn't the one to learn how to play. This is really just to give you context and framing, because I've been doing these intros all along. And we'll load this up.